Ladies and gentlemen, we have breaking news as Kyle Schwarber is not going anywhere. One of the top sluggers in all of baseball has agreed to a new contract to remain in Philadelphia, with Dave Dombrowski getting the job done. This is how the offseason needed to start for the Philadelphia Phillies, and Dave Dombrowski made sure that was exactly the case, locking their guy up on another long-term deal. To break down why this was the right decision for the Phillies overall, what still needs to go down, and why it is such a sigh of relief to have Schwarber remaining in a Phillies uniform. So to get right into it here, do want to start off with the headline, the breaking coming from Jeff Passan here, who says, breaking, slugger Kyle Schwarber and the Philadelphia Phillies are finalizing a 5-year, $150 million contract, sources tell ESPN. The NL MVP runner-up, one of the best home run hitters and clubhouse leaders in baseball, is returning to Philadelphia. And he follows this up with the tweet that none of the typical impediments, whether it's age 33 on opening day or position of DH, got in the way of Kyle Schwarber landing a half-decade-long contract at a record AAV for a designated hitter, which is $30 million. Teams lined up to pay for what Schwarber does on the field and off, a mega deal. Now, to interject here, we knew that the price point was going to be high, that this was the biggest hurdle with Kyle Schwarber, and from all reports that centered around winter meetings and anything else, all the buzz around baseball, there was a strong market for the slugger. That I was curious what this final number would end at because of those unique circumstances. The age that he's playing with, him having a career year at the advanced age of his career overall here, and of course designated here, that there is not quite the pure value for what that brings to the table. This is not a first base position where you know you're going to need that on an everyday basis, that there are unique circumstances that make it a little bit more difficult to step up and pay that premium there. But Kyle Schwarber is one of the unique circumstances in which that is the case. He is coming off a season with the Phillies in which he had second in all of baseball, 56 home runs, 132 RBIs, led the National League there. Across his 604 at-bats, had 108 walks, 145 hits, stole 10 bases, which is pretty wild there, and 197 strikeouts. Now, we've seen Schwarber be used in sort of a variety of roles for this Phillies team. Let's not forget that there was the leadoff Kyle Schwarber experience for quite an extended period of time, with Rob Thomson continually making the case, well, there's not much I like better than starting off a baseball game with a 1-0 lead, and I hear that. But we've also seen Schwarber be a pure cleanup hitter, be a guy, and any way you slice it, is just so necessary to this Phillies team that I think we all had the reactionary frustration when this season ended, with them failing to get to that World Series pinnacle for another consecutive playoff here. But once I watched the Dodgers just steamroll their way through the rest of baseball here, and by the way, them signing Edwin Diaz, and just seconds later, it felt like after the Schwarber deal was announced there, they are not going anywhere anytime soon. But it did have me reflect on if this team is the gold standard of baseball, which I think we have to acknowledge the Dodgers as. They've won back-to-back World Series. They've got their core in place, and they're only intent on adding. How do you combat that? When I look at this Phillies team, any way I try and solve that problem still involves Kyle Schwarber. The biggest thing that stood out is just the pure power that he brought to the table. When this era of Phillies baseball was first constructed, it was about mashing home runs. It was about, we're going to have all these sluggers in the lineup that are going to be difficult to shut down, and we sort of have fallen off that being the actual results. Just to look at the team home run leaders in all of baseball this season. The Philadelphia Phillies coming in the 9th slot for that. That's teams like the Yankees, the Dodgers, the Mariners, the Angels, the Mets, the Cubs, the Athletics, and Arizona Diamondbacks hitting more home runs than the Phillies this season, with them finishing with 212. Mind you, that occurs with Kyle Schwarber's 50-plus home runs, the second in all of baseball, 56 being the specific number, as a part of this. Think about what these power numbers look like if Schwarber is not a part of that equation there. And especially when thinking forward, that there's still a lot more questions that we do have to break down about this Phillies team. That this is just the start of what needs to be an incredibly essential offseason towards building to actual postseason success. But when you factor some of the assumptions that we already have, a guy like Justin Crawford likely holding down a spot in the outfield this season, which seems to be the entire expectations from the organization, that's not going to guy that's going to add to the power pot. That he is going to be more of a singles, a doubles hitter, a speed guy on the base path, an incredible fielder. That's the vision for who Justin Crawford can be. But he does not help in that type of category. Nick Castellanos seems to have one foot out the door already. Say what you want about Castellanos, but there is at least the threat of the power source that he does bring on, even with the numbers being a bit down this year. I bring this all up to say there needs to be more power in this lineup as a whole, and losing Kyle Schwarber would just make that concern even larger. So I'm happy that Dave Dombrowski did step up to the table and pay that price. I'm happy that Kyle Schwarber was willing to, sign on the dotted line at this stage of the offseason. Now, one of my greater concerns beyond him just not returning to Philadelphia was if this drug out for the entirety of the offseason, where he's trying to pinch every penny, get that premium price, whatever that may be. And that would have prevented the Phillies from building out the rest of the roster. Your calculus for how do you improve this overall roster changes in a massive extent whether or not Kyle Schwarber is a part of that vision. You now have this in place, that he is with the Phillies. He is locked up for the next 5 years for that $150 million price point. And now you got to figure out the other directions that you need to go. So I'm thrilled that this is already set in stone. It is official. Kyle Schwarber is back, and there's still a lot of work to be done with this Phillies team. So shout out to Kyle Schwarber. And by the way, just to add a little bit more context, I did want to pull up the full article from Jeff Passan here, in which he writes, Orlando, Florida, slugger Kyle Schwarber and the Philadelphia Phillies are finalizing a 5-year, $150 million contract, sources told ESPN on Tuesday, reuniting the National League home run hitter and the franchise with whom he blossomed into a perennial MVP candidate. Following a frenzied free agency that saw efforts to sign Schwarber by the New York Mets, the Boston Red Sox, the Baltimore Orioles, and even small market teams like Pittsburgh and his hometown Cincinnati, a late push by Philadelphia secured the 32-year-old a rare big money long-term deal for a designated hitter. Coming off a division series loss to the eventual World Series champion Los Angeles Dodgers, the Phillies balked at life without Schwarber, their clear clubhouse leader and a highly respected figure in the game. His propensity for clutch hits buoyed the Phillies in 2025 when he flashed second in MVP voting after hitting 240, 365, and 563 with 56 home runs and an NL leading 132 RBIs. So well said there, and you can see the interest was real. And it would have broken my heart. The only way that this would have really gone entirely south if it was a team like the Mets or the Red Sox. Those would have bothered me. For him playing for another big market team that is intent on contending there, I'm glad it did not go that direction. If it was a decision of he wants to play for his hometown Cincinnati Reds, that was sort of one of those spots where there's nothing that you can really do about that from the Phillies' perspective. And by the way, to Kyle Schwarber, if that itch is still scratching following these 5 years, I think we can say our farewells. But right now, the moment is for you to help win a World Series in Philadelphia, and that is a guy that absolutely can help compete with this role. So shout out to Kyle Schwarber once again for being back in Philadelphia. Like I said, there's still a lot more work to be done with this Phillies roster. This cannot just be a run it back, repackage things, and hope for better results at another playoff. We got to take some swings. There has to be some sort of upgrades. Nick Castellanos, how is that going to end? The pitching staff, we continue to hear some buzz in Japan of a potential signing over there. We will see how all these figures do break down, but this is the exact start of the offseason that Phillies needed to do. Kyle Schwarber was priority number one on the checklist, the to-do list that Dave Dombrowski had to ultimately achieve, and that is one step in the right direction. So shout out to Dave Dombrowski, shout out to Kyle Schwarber for being back, and shout out to you guys for tuning into this video here. Do want to hear from you guys below. What is next for the Phillies? What is the next move that you're making? What's your initial reaction to Schwarber officially being back? Is there a level of surprise? I personally did feel that I thought this is how it was going to conclude throughout the duration of the offseason here, but there was a little bit more fear in me than I expected to be the case. But nonetheless, we can put that to the side. Kyle Schwarber is back. We want to keep rocking on things right here on Phillies Digest. So appreciate you guys for tuning in. As always, make sure you're smashing that subscribe button, dropping a like on this video below. I'll be back talking to you next time. Peace.